The middle rounds of your draft, man. This is where the championships are won. And Tyler, man, obviously, when you're talking about middle rounds, this is where you can start to get your picks, right? The players that you are interested in. And this is where I think strategy starts to become, a little bit more intricate. In the early rounds, you're getting great players, but in the middle rounds, this can be make or break territory when you're getting the depth of your starting lineup and the top of your bench. So let's talk about some middle round targets and players that you're looking to get in this range. Tyler, who's somebody in the middle rounds during your mock drafts, or even in your real drafts right now that you find yourself targeting?
So the first one that I'm going to say, and I do think he's probably going to climb up a little bit, is going to be Rashee Rice. And why I like Rashee Rice is, first, obviously, you have Marquise Brown, who's going to be out for probably like the first 3 weeks of the season, maybe four, which I still was drafting Rashee Rice even before this. And the reason why is just when we see rookies who typically finish as top 36, borderline top 40 or 24 wide receivers their first year, and they break out later in the season, they usually continue to grow. So with Rashee Rice last year, down the stretch, I want to say weeks 10 onward, once he was a full-time player, he was a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football. And I believe this year, it doesn't look like he's going to be suspended. He hasn't even met with the NFL yet. He has a late, I want to say December 8th, I believe, is the court date right now. So the court date's pushed later into the season. He's probably going to get a suspension next season. So just a guy that I think there's so much potential there with Rashee Rice. Playing with Patrick Mahomes, he was the clear number one guy at the end of last season. And I think year two, he's only going to take a step forward. So he's one guy that I love to draft.
Yeah, I'm not mad at Rashee Rice, and he's the player that obviously, if he doesn't get suspended, his ADP has already been cratered. So you're getting a really good value at him. I do think there's some other weapons there on the Chiefs, though, that might impact that. But I think if there's going to be one receiver that you want to take, it is Rashee Rice, especially at the value he's going right now. When I look at the middle rounds, I also look for, I think this is a good place for receivers, especially because receiver depth has a very steep drop off right after you're getting outside the top 35 receivers. But somebody who's going just inside the top 20 is George Pickens. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously, one of the main target hogs of this team is gone, Deontay Johnson. And there's been a lot of rumors, Tyler, about, Brandon Ayuk going there or not. I'm not concerned at all. Even if Brandon Ayuk comes there to the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think George Pickens is still going to be a massive value at his ADP right now. New offense with Arthur Smith, and a lot of people complain about the inconsistencies through an Arthur Smith offense. For me, that doesn't bother me one bit. There's an ample amount of opportunity for a guy that had over 1,100 yards last season and is now paired with better quarterback play. I don't care which quarterback it is. Russell Wilson, who's the presumed starter, or even Justin Fields, if that happens a little bit later into the season, both of those guys like to throw the deep ball and can get the ball to their number one receivers. We saw Justin Fields with DJ Moore last year. So I think Pickens, to me, is at least an 1,100-yard, 1,200-yard floor guy who are getting as the wide receiver like 25 to 30 range. I think there's upside for more than that, especially if a Brandon Ayuk does not join this team. So I think George Pickens is a name that people are probably soured on because he's a little inconsistent. He's been hampered by bad quarterback play in the past. But this is a brand new season for George Pickens, and I think we're getting a really good value of him, especially if you get him as like your wide receiver 3.
So where would you take him if Brandon Ayuk goes there?
Same spot. The thing is, the ceiling is limited. Because of ADP, he's at a really good place where, like, you can build in a little extra ceiling. Like maybe I'd bump him up a couple extra spots if Brandon Ayuk doesn't go there. But I think his floor is still 1,100 yards, even with Brandon Ayuk. We saw that last year with Deontay Johnson.
I wouldn't be as high if Ayuk goes there, but that's just me. I do think if Ayuk doesn't go there, then I really like George. But let's go with the next one.
Hold on. If Ayuk does go there, where would you put him? Because right now he's probably like wide receiver 28-ish. So where would
he's
you
probably right around there. Like I would definitely take Rashee Rice over him. I would rather take Jaden Reed over him. And like I think that it kind of gets down to like Calvin Ridley range is where I would start putting him. So I'd put him more like 6th, maybe 7th round, like a round or two later. It's just I also think that there's still some really good wide receivers on the board where he's going if Ayuk goes there, which I think Ayuk would be the number one target personally.
He would. I agree with that. But obviously in the middle round, we talked about a couple targets. Give me another one that you like in the middle rounds. Like who's
so we'll stay in Pittsburgh. And I've been kind of coming off the Najee Harris. I'm not gonna lie. Oh, I
Really?
like Najee Harris. I still like Najee Harris. But if I'm going to take one of these guys, I'd rather just take Jalen Warren for PPR leagues. And the reason being is last year, Jalen Warren, he was 5th in targets and receptions at the running back position. He's this team's clear pass catching back. They want him back there. And what we saw last year too was basically an even split between him and Najee. I think Najee will be more the early down grinder. This team is going to run the football a ton. This is probably going to be one of the, if not the run heaviest team in the NFL. So you have a team, Arthur Smith over the past 2 seasons. No team has ran the football more than the Atlanta Falcons. No team over the past 2 seasons have ran the ball more in neutral game scripts than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's going to be a very run heavy team. But with Jalen Warren, receptions are more valuable than carries in PPR leagues. So in your PPR formats, I'd rather take the guy who's going to be the clear pass catching back for this team. Playing, I think it's probably going to be Russell Wilson as a starting quarterback here. We'll see, but it's probably going to be Russ. But Russ last year checked the ball down at the highest rate of all NFL quarterbacks. And we saw like Cordero Patterson be a top 10 running back in Arthur Smith's scheme. I think Arthur Smith gets a lot of hate because of what happened with Bijan last year, but Bijan was still a top. He was RB8 on the season. He's just going a little bit too high in drafts. He was still really good. We've seen Tyler Algier be effective. So I like both these guys, but if I'm going to take one of them, why not just take Najee, or why not just take Jalen Warren, who goes around later, sometimes 2 rounds later. So I really like Jalen Warren for where he's currently going.
It's tough, man. As a Najee stand, it's tough to hear you say that, and somebody who's gone to bat for him. But I can see a little bit of upside with Jalen Warren. It's just, you mentioned one thing. You said catches are more valuable than carries. You know what's more valuable than catches? Touchdowns, baby. And that's what Najee was getting a lot of in the second half last year. But I'm not mad at the Jalen Warren pick, but I still do like Najee. I'm not giving up on my boy. Another one of my targets, man, and you mentioned his name just a second ago. Another one of my targets, Calvin Ridley, man. And to me, this doesn't make sense why he's going outside the top 30 receivers right now. I get that he burned a lot of people last year, but that was another instance of people just taking a player too high. Everybody got excited about the Jacksonville situation, getting paired with Trevor Lawrence. He was coming back off of being suspended, and everybody expected Atlanta Calvin Ridley when that wasn't the case. They spread the ball out a little bit more in Jacksonville. So he's being taken as a top 12 receiver. Where did he finish? Wide receiver 18 in PPR league. So to me, I'm like, if he had that kind of finish, why is he going outside of the top 30 receivers? Is it just because he's paired with Will Levis? Is it just because he's in Tennessee now and we're expecting that to be a bad offense? Probably. In the AFC style still, he knows the teams. And when it gets down to it, you look at Brian Callahan, who is now the head coach there, had some success in Cincinnati with the passing game. You got Will Levis, who's taking some major turns this offseason. And they talked about the Jamar Chase role. I know that's your guy, Tyler. They've talked about the Jamar Chase role for Calvin Ridley. So even if he has a drop-off in production because of quarterback, I look at his team and I'm like, bro, the role is set up for him to be the man. They paid him to be the man there in Tennessee. And you talk about Will Levis and the concerns there. During Will Levis's starts, DeAndre Hopkins was a top 10 receiver. So we know he can carry a receiver. If Will Levis does improve his game, it's only going to get better. I love getting Calvin Ridley as your wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4. I'm not even scared to take him early because I think he's going to significantly outplay this wide receiver 33-ish type range that he's going in right now.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I also think that with DeAndre Hopkins' injury, it's kind of because I don't really like these 2 guys just because I felt like they're going to be definitely competing for targets. And yes, this team's probably going to throw the ball more, but I also don't know if Will Levis is going to be any good. If he's decent though, like I think Calvin Ridley will be really good. But I also think like the injury to DeAndre Hopkins really boosts him because it's DeAndre Hopkins older, an injury to start the season. I don't like that kind of stuff. So I do think that right now he's a pretty good value.
I ain't mad at it, man. Well, we did enough glazing right here for the first few picks, right? We got to get into the hate part of it now. So